I'm John Mortimer, and in this video, we're going to learn about one of the most innovative, rapid, and practical ways of making real transformation happen. We'll look at what test and learn is, how it works, and what we need to do to make it succeed. Test and learn is a fundamentally innovative way of breaking through current ways of working. It helps us to come up with transformed new approaches to how we design and operate an organization. And let's have a look at its power. Well, in the late 60s and early 1970s, the Japanese took over the automotive industry across the world, in particular in Europe and the US. And the way that they did this is that they introduced a new way of developing cars and a new way of working together. At that time, we were very grouped together in silos. Organizations were run along traditional lines. And the Japanese came along and they showed us a very different way of working. And that way of working, one of those cornerstones was actually test and learn. They developed multi-disciplinary teams that worked in that way. And in the 1980s, Europe and the US tried to copy that and failed. And we know why. The reason why is that they simply took bits and they tried to copy what they saw. They tried to take those bits and incorporate them into their current organization and their current way of working. They didn't really understand what it was that they were taking as well. It's taken decades for the automotive industry across the world to learn how to do this. It's actually taken a new generation of people with new thinking to actually make it work. Let's have a look at two types of change in an organization. The first one is incremental change, and the other is transformation. Incremental change is about doing the same thing that you already do, but it's doing it better. The status quo remains the same. Transformation is about doing different and better things. It's about working and behaving differently. Public sector reform is transformation, and it's about doing better things. When does reform not work? Well, actually, we've tried countless times, countless initiatives, Buurtzorg in health, many attempts in local authorities, and we've attempted to make them work by placing them on top of our current organizations. And these new approaches simply don't survive. They're swamped by the current ways of working. That's why with real transformation, you need to undo what's already there. You need to undo the old and replace it with the new. You can't just put it on top. Undoing the old is something quite difficult. This is one of the two key reasons why test and learn has been unsuccessful in so many organizations. Underlying thinking and principles that we hold about how organizations should be designed, how we design services, what managers do and how they behave, how we control and measure the work, how the hierarchy works, how to design job roles, and how we collaborate together, how we manage risk, how we design flexibility at the front line. And doing all of this while maintaining clarity and control of what's going on. That's what transformation and reform is actually all about. To enable all of these things to be challenged, we need to allow for alternative approaches to be explored. To do that in a safe space, disconnected from the current ways of working. Therefore, the test and learn needs to be done separate from the current system. And it actually has to eventually replace the current system. Test and learn is ideally placed to do this because the principal concept is in creating a team of frontline people that represent the whole of the end-to-end of the service, putting them in a room and giving them permission to explore past the current policies, rules, and constraints of the organization. To explore in a safe space, controlled, so that we use that to test experiments, to test ideas, to measure their impacts, and subsequently collate what we've learned. It is the stage after that where the decision makers decide how and what was learned and how they're going to take it into a working prototype. New management and leadership needs to be explored, so managers are a key part of the team. Decision makers have to be courageous and be prepared to challenge how they currently work. Let's have a look at a method of change that was developed by John Seddon. This actually came from Toyota, and Toyota is probably one of the most foremost companies in the world that have championed test and learned. So what we're going to do is take how they do it and incorporate that into a method of change, which involves systems thinking and intervention theory at the same time. So we start with the current design of the organization, and typically what I tend to do is look at the current organization, the performance, and the way of working. And we also need to do that to understand the impact on the customer and to measure the current ways of working, the waste and so forth. After that, the decision makers decide to move to the next stage, which is the test and learn. Once we've learned enough, we then go to the next stage, which is the prototype. And the prototype is where we actually take from test and learn and make it into something that can be operational within the organization. And then after that, you end up with a new design. Okay, so let's have a look at how this actually works. The team in the experiment at the test and learn, the way that that works is that they work on real demands, new demands. How does test and learn work? The way that we do this is the team take real demands from the customer. In the public sector, this is performed whether it's with people that need social care, planning permission, filling potholes, dealing with people who haven't paid their council tax. The key thing is not to design on paper, but to design by taking those real demands and learning from working with that directly, because that's where the innovation occurs. That's where the new ideas come from that we would never have thought of. So let's have a look at a video that I made that for another group that demonstrates the principles and the way of working behind test and learn. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come back and have a look at some examples of when we've done this. So what's the difference? Let's just summarize what's the difference between doing the old traditional way of doing it. What we normally do is we start off with what matters to us and our organization, and we call in all these people to design or redesign a service. These are all the important departments that should be involved. And of course, the managers are either there themselves or they choose who should be there. And what they do is they decide what should be in the new process, what procedures, the sign-offs, the standards, the categories that we're going to use, the measures, all of this kind of stuff. And then someone in a room somewhere designs the process, probably some internal change people and design people. We design, some cases, a mission and vision and culture. This is how we want it to be. We want it to be inclusive. We want it to be this. We want it to be that. And of course, we have to include the people that do the work, so they're allowed to come in and have a look. That's kind of the traditional way that I used to be involved in working in redesign of a service. And I thought that was great. But what I realized is the power is in that group of people there. They're the ones that actually design this. Regardless if you're a designer or not, it's that group of people there that decide what the design should be. Now, this is different. This, we start with the customer and we start with what matters to the customer. And we use a different set of principles, of course, systems thinking principles. We have a team which include senior managers, mid-level managers. We spend time understanding what's going on, and we move to the experiment. So in the understand phase, we look at purpose. We have the manager connected to the team. In the experiment, we start taking new demands, and we're in a bubble, and no one else is allowed in that bubble. Even if a senior director comes, I'm kind of like a gatekeeper. I either keep them out or I allow them to come in, but under certain restrictions. They're not allowed to say what they think in front of the team, for instance. So in the experiment, we're doing that, and we start to engage with some of these other parts of the organization, but we pull them in when we need them. We decide under our rules when we pull in these people. And then after a time, it moves into a prototype. The manager moves full-time into the team. That team becomes the team that's developing the new service. And we start to develop all the things that we need, the new workflow, the processes, the frameworks, the measures, all the documentation. We set the IT systems up and all that kind of stuff, preparing for this is the new way of working. But can you see the other elements are still outside? We decide how they're brought in. And that then becomes the operational service. The power is there. The managers are nowhere to be seen. They are there, actually, but they're not in a position of, they're in a position of saying, yes, let's take this forward. But then they shouldn't be there to say, I think you should do this. If they do want to make some decisions, they have to follow the principles that the team are using. And I put them in the room and they discuss things with the team. And half the time, the team convinced them that actually that's not the right thing to do. So the manager has to be prepared to work in a networked way. You have a delegated team that's working in a different way to how they were before. And for some managers, that's very uncomfortable. So I have to work with that manager over time to help them to see a new way, to understand a new way of managing. Now that we've looked at how test and learn works, I'm going to take you through some examples where test and learn has been used within organizations to redesign services. That's the method of change that we use. And what we're now going to do is switch over to the experiment. Looking at what we do when we first understand the current organization is typically we look at the journey of the customer, what's involved in that, what the measures are. We look at how the current system works. And this is an example of decisions that a frontline person had to make when someone called in. But we don't want to change this. We don't want to modify this. We want to push it away and we want to start again. That's far easier than trying to change this. And that's what test and learn is really all about. The team start with a set of principles, and those principles are what helps guide them to learn about new ways of working. The first principle is understand what matters for each person and each demand. We make decisions based on knowledge and evidence, not opinion and not standards. We only do what's needed to create value for the customer and try not to do anything else. And that removes waste in the service. We take ownership in the team through the end-to-end journey with the person, all the way through. We work as a team without any departmental barriers whatsoever. We're here to learn and improve. Rule number 1, don't break the law. And rule number 2, don't make the person's situation worse. This is an example of a team of people in a room with all the artifacts around them, doing what they need to do. And this slide here, for instance, demonstrates the measures that they gather. And this is really important. They compare the old measures with the new measures. And that comes over time, because that's how we see what we've learned, whether what we've learned is better or worse. The team have lots of artifacts on the wall that help to communicate what they're doing and show progress. And they summarize this when they need to show leaders and other people that come into the room that want to know what's going on. This slide here is a list of current barriers in the way of working that we currently have that stop the organization from doing those innovative things that the team have found. And it's those things that the decision makers are most interested in, because those are the things that need to change in the current system to make the new learning work. This is an example of the comparison, summary comparison of the old and new way of working. And these are examples of different teams and what they have up on the walls, showing the kind of work that they're doing. And what's interesting, and in particular, I'm going to go back to the idea of the measures. It's important to understand what's really going on. So if you see the upper diagram, you can see that at different phases of the experiment, you have different types of outcomes. And then you look at the reasons why those outcomes occur. And in the bottom graph, actually what happened between the old way of working and the new way of working. And you can see a marked difference. And that's the key to making this really work. That's the key to a test and learn, is when you see that type of transformation. I hope you've seen that doing this in organizations refocuses the purpose of the service on the customer. It cuts unnecessary activities. In this example here, the original flow was the one at the top of the screen, and that was then changed to the one at the bottom. And you can see the difference. It cuts preventable demand from 60 or 40%, perhaps right down to 5%. It brings in collaboration and team working. It's the start of continuous improvement. So it's a whole new way of working. In the public sector, test and learn comes from different places. One of the places that it comes from is the Vanguard method, which is also called the liberated method. And as you've just seen, it liberates us to be allowed to truly innovate. It's not just about a new way of working, though. It's about challenging our current beliefs about how the work works. It challenges how we make decisions. It challenges us with regards to the hierarchy and how control works, and the way that we manage risk. That's what transformation and reform is actually all about. And that's why this is so difficult. But anyway, I hope that you have found this useful and helpful. In the description, there are links to more information, more resources on how to do this, and also examples that demonstrate this. Thank you.